So, welcome to the not free country of Australia. I think for a long time, actually, people from a particular cultural background or religious background or socio-economic background have really felt that, there were a lot of things in Australia that meant that you were not so free, not so lucky as the rest in this country. And I think now, though, with this whole COVID thing that's going on, the situation has been kind of made worse, highlighted. It's really been brought to bear upon a lot of people who are within what you would call the secular community. So non-religious people per se, people who don't have a traditional faith within, the recognised world religious faiths. There might be football fans or something like that, or religiously drink beer or whatever, religiously watch television or something like that. But, it's not really what you would call an acknowledged faith system or belief system. So it's referred to as secular, non-religious. But these people now are being caught up in this not free Australia reality that's been there for a very long time. It's not a free country. There are heaps of restrictions and there's a lot of hypocrisy and a lot of oppressive stuff, within the legal system. The way that the essential services operate. It's been called now in the US an open air prison, the world's largest open air prison. It kind of reminds me of the movies back in the 1980s that I watched as a kid, with Kurt Russell. He was kind of the action hero of the day back then, and John Carpenter. They teamed up on movies like Escape from New York, Escape from LA and stuff like that, with Snake Plissken, the guy with the snake tattoo on his arm, the roughneck guy with the long hairdo and, the muscles and that, and the short sort of singlet tops or whatever, the guns on the side. And he'd come in, he was a rogue, never obeyed any rules, just lived by his own code. They'd call him in and throw him into these open air prisons that they'd created in the future. This was kind of the vision of the future. New York or Manhattan Island had been turned into this massive prison, basically, which was kind of secluded, or you couldn't get in or out of it. There was massively high fences, and obviously patrolled and guarded from the outside, with guards around the walls of it and stuff. So, but it was basically a jungle in there, criminal world jungle kind of thing, like a prison environment where they're free to roam, But more or less, there are parts of Sydney now and Melbourne and goodness knows other places in the country that are being turned into these what they're calling open air prisons. Where you're really restricted and controlled, and you can't do what you should be able to do normally. Just normal things like getting a haircut, going and getting a meal from a pub or a club or something, sitting in a cafe to drink whatever, drink a cup of coffee or something. These basic kind of things, and they've heightened the ridiculous kind of scenario where you've got to wear, masks and things, and now they're trying to create mandatory vaccination, and the really pathetic aspect of it is that not only has the government bungled every aspect of the response to COVID in terms of getting out vaccinations fast enough to be effective, and sort of created a system that would allow us to get our businesses going and our economy back on track. They've got it to the state now where it's disastrous in terms of the effect it's had on economies and people's health and psychological health and well-being and things like that. and the bullying, the level of bullying and the mentality of the essential services like Victorian police, it's really beyond a joke. They're playing ridiculous, buff-headed kind of brutality games with people, and that's what it is. Let's be honest about it. I mean, they even acknowledge themselves that these, this not mental health act. It should be a mental health act. What are they calling it? The Health Act or whatever, or health regulations or health orders or whatever, the public health orders or something like that. That this legislation is beyond a joke. With what the expectation is for the Australian public to be able to comply with this. I mean, nobody knows what it means. It's being randomly applied, hypocritically. When I studied law, the idea of the rule of law was that you were equal under the law. That's one of the big principles of law, equal under the law. But we're not being treated as equal under the law. It's being applied in a very random, ad hoc way, unfairly to certain individuals. So, with a mentality of taking away people's freedoms. That seems to be the underlying thought process or new world order that's taking place at the moment. It's trending towards authoritative, more communistic styles of government. That's what we're heading towards in this country. So I think the idea of the lucky country and, the land of the free country like America, those kind of days are in the past. This is the land of the communist takeover, I think, the authoritarian state, the so-called conspiracy theory New World Order, where it's controlled by some sort of so-called elite people, like Jeff Bezos or whatever. Those ridiculous robo phone calls you keep getting from somebody claiming to be Amazon saying that your account's been charged for something. I mean, come on, Bezos, how much money do you need, mate? I mean, how big do you have to make your phallic symbol to try and compensate for your inadequacies as a human being? I mean, give us a break out here, We're real human beings, not sort of playboys, whatever the heck you're trying to be. You're not elite in any way, shape or form. I don't respect people that don't treat others as equal. And if you can't see other people as equal, then you become something less than equal yourself. Just think of that fact, So where are we going with this kind of situation? When's it going to end? They keep rolling it back. Here in Australia they're saying now, the 1st of December? Or something like that is when the lockdowns are going to end. But, it's doubtful because the plans just keep changing all the time. The goalposts keep changing. So goodness knows where and what will happen between now and then, because that's a long 2 months and it's becoming out of control with the freedom movement. It's growing like a snowball. It really is. And I don't think the essential services have really got the stomach to keep this going forever. I think it's going to reach a state where the I'm the king of the castle, and you're the dirty rascal thing is going to lose its momentum, lose its efficacy, and people are going to start throwing back the same amount of horse shit that's coming out of the government. I can see these construction workers, standing on their own scaffolding, throwing horse shit down on Victoria Police, because that's really where it's gotten to. Let's be king of the castle. It would be an absurd game. But I think Victoria Police would tire of it very rapidly if they were copying the same level of horse shit, that the government's heaping on us, man. So this has got to end. Seriously, it's got to end. Give us back our freedoms, Let us have some choices. Let's have a real democratic government, and a real, government for the people, by the people. Come on, enough's enough. I don't care what your name is, where you come from, what education that you were given, that was paid for by somebody, that you really didn't deserve, that you were handed a golden ticket in life and others were not. Well, give it up, man. You're not what you think you are. We are all equal, in fact. We are all equal. Equal under God, and theoretically equal under the law. So bear that in mind. Cast aside your pretenses, and let's get down to the basics, and get back to the truth, of what Australia was founded upon, what our principles were, as established in that document called the Australian Constitution. People say there's no rights that come out of the Australian Constitution, but that's not true. There are rights in there. Commentators have said they're not moral rights. They are moral rights, because you could say freedom of religion, 116. That's very moralistic. Religious beliefs are founded on moral principles. The idea of higher laws that come from God. That's basically what morals are. Higher laws that come from God. So, and they form the basis of religious belief systems. So the idea that that the Constitution doesn't contain moral claims, well, that's not true. It does. Freedom of religion is a massive moral claim. So, I mean, and it just depends on how absurd you want to become with it. I mean, if you want to take the mentality of our governments at the moment, and and the essential services and stuff, you'd set yourself up, rather than have a union, you'd become a religious organisation. So you become some branch, secular religion, like the Australian Construction Workers, New Era Adventists or something, goodness knows. Register yourself as a religious organisation, and then say something ridiculous like, it's against my religion to not be allowed to smoke while I'm working. That's against my religion. And that could be part of your religious code. It's against my religion, construction industry Adventists, or whatever, first day Adventists, Inventists, to receive a jab, to receive a vaccination. That's against my construction worker religion, which is also a football code or something. Yeah, so I mean, give people a break. We do have freedoms. Freedom of movement is actually within the Constitution. Freedom of movement is in there. So you are actually free under the Constitution to move within your own state, and from within and outside of Australia and back in again. That aspect is a part of the Constitution. That is another right that's in there. Freedom of movement. It does take its it does also tap into international human rights, which we're signed on to. We're actually a signatory to the United Nations Charter of Human Rights, which contains the same human rights in it about freedom of movement and stuff like that. So I mean, on an international level, human rights can be taken away to some extent, or what they call abrogated, in the event of a national emergency or something. But national emergencies have to involve a situation where everybody in Australia is at risk of death. So you're talking about like a war situation where everybody is at risk of being killed. But once you reach a certain level of vaccination in Australia, which we've already reached, we're over 50%. In most states now, I think, that are even double vaccinated, getting up towards 60, 70, 80%, 90% whatever first dose, and then second dose or whatever. So the vast majority of people really now are not faced with a life and death situation. Even if they got one of these strands of COVID, they wouldn't die from it. So it's no longer really a national emergency. It's not a national emergency anymore. So really, I can't see a legal basis for them to keep withholding our freedoms, that are legally entitled to us under the Australian Constitution and under the Charter of Human Rights. I can't see a situation where they can do that indefinitely, And some commentators have said, well, the Constitution is not law, but that's not what I learned at university, and I studied constitutional law. The Constitution is, in fact, the highest law in the country. It's the law above all laws in Australia. So the Australian Constitution definitely is a law. It's a law above all other laws, in fact. It confers certain powers upon parliaments to make laws, but it is a law of itself. It is a law unto itself. It's the highest law in Australia. So it can only be changed by processes like a referendum. So it's not this idea of people saying that the Constitution is not a law and it's the acts of Parliament that dictate what goes on in Australia. That's rubbish. That's absolute rubbish. And there are specific provisions within the Constitution that say if certain laws go against what's in the Constitution, they can be struck down as being unconstitutional. So you can make whatever rubbishy act of Parliament you like at a state or a federal level, which is completely at odds with the Australian Constitution. It just has to be challenged in the High Court, and the High Court says, well, this does not comply with the Constitution of Australia. So this, in fact, is not a law. It's not a law in Australia. It's rubbish. It's struck down as unconstitutional. It doesn't matter what ridiculous acts of Parliament you make, if they don't comply with what's written down, what's mandated, what's codified in the Constitution, it's not a law in Australia. It's unconstitutional. So don't give me this crap that the legislation made by Parliament is the law. It's not. It's not. If it doesn't comply with the Australian Constitution, it is not law in Australia. So it always goes back to the Constitution as the highest law. So anyhow, I could waffle on about this sort of stuff for a long time, but I won't. Living in a country now that is not free, where the hypocrisy is kind of out in full bloom. You're starting to see the level of hypocrisy in Australia. It's starting to affect the secular community, not just the religious members of society, not just those who have certain beliefs that were, not widely held. Well, welcome to our world. See, welcome to the world of people who actually stand up for something that they believe in, who believe in freedoms, and that's what Jesus the Christ said, about what it is to be a Christian. It's about being free. It's about freedoms, the freedoms of Christianity. That's what Jesus was really on about, and he opposed religious hypocrisy, religious legalism, and sort of draconian laws and restrictions and things like the Sabbath. You can't work on the Sabbath, mate. That's a Jewish law that's handed down from the Old Testament, stuff like that. And Jesus just said to them, look, I made that law. I wrote it. Why? Because he said he was God, and he proved it by being resurrected after being nailed to a cross, crucified, stabbed through the side, blood and water poured out of him. He was dead, man. And the Romans were experts at killing people. There was no doubt about it that he was dead at the end of their torture, and execution process. He was definitely dead at the end of that. No doubt about it. Doctors today will tell you that if blood comes out of you that's separated into the red cells in the water, then that's a clinical proof that you're dead. And that's what happened to him. That's what happened when the Roman pierced his side. The blood that came out of him was separated into two different parts, with the water being separate. So he was clinically dead. But he rose from the dead nonetheless. as he predicted prophetically through the Bible. Destroy this temple, meaning his body. His body was the temple of the Spirit of God. Destroy that, and in 3 days it will be resurrected. It will be built back again. And that's exactly what happened. On the third day he rose from the dead. So he overcame death, and by doing that he offers that same solution to all of us. We trust in him, we become a part of him, we become part of his temple, his body, and we too will be raised from the dead, from death, which effectively is being out of relationship with God. Just to tag that on the end there. Death really is not just the secular concept of it, that your heart stops, your brain stops, or whatever. That's not death. You can be dead long before that, in fact, because you don't have a relationship with God. So anyone that doesn't have a relationship with the true living God is in fact dead. They're dead. Demons are dead by definition, because they're out of relationship with God. They might relate to the devil, but they don't relate to God at all, at any level. So they're dead by definition. They might sort of be animated and have an existence and what we might call a life of some sort, but biblically speaking, that is death. It's a living death, like a zombie sort of thing, you could say. So there are people already on the earth that are living in a kind of zombified state, realistically, where they're not really alive eternally, spiritually. They're actually dead, like walking dead, that will just pass into eternal damnation, which is a horrible thought, but there it is, So I would spare anyone from that, by trusting in God, trusting in what Jesus Christ of Nazareth has done for you. Just accept it. It's as simple. I think the basic essence of the gospel is contained in Peter, where he says, confess with your mouth, believe in your heart that you have been saved, and you will be saved. So it's just basically confessing with your mouth. So you would have to confess that you are a sinner, that you are guilty of sin, which basically means rebelling against God. You're basically saying, okay, God, I admit I've rebelled against you. I've broken your laws. I've broken your rules. I'm doing the wrong thing according to what you have ordained, what you have said, I should do with my life. I'm in fact doing the wrong thing. I admit that. I'm like an addict. I'm a compulsive, do the wrong thing person, a sinner. So if you can admit that, admit that Jesus Christ is Lord. So that's the other aspect of it. You have to admit that Jesus is Lord, and that should be in all of us. It should be spiritually there. The knowledge that God is the creator of the universe is also within us. We look at the world around us, the creative wonder that it is, and we know that it has a creator. We know that God is a creator. Jesus was the agent of that creation, so he's in all of creation. His genius, his mastery of the universe, his ability to control nature, walk on water, through Moses parting the Red Sea, calming the storms, the wind and the waves, things like that, healing the sick, giving sight to the blind. These are all things that he did. He didn't have to use any magic tricks or any medicines or anything, just by word. And by word he spoke the universe into existence, by the word of God. Jesus is the author of life, the author of creation. He did all that just by his word. So when the Romans tried to say, that he wasn't, who he said he was, or the Jews were trying to say, that he didn't, he wasn't understanding the Jewish laws and things like that, it was absurd. He wrote them. He wrote the Bible, basically. He's the author of the Bible. So for them to be challenging him, it's just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. So once you can take that on board and accept we are living in an evil world, a world that is governed by the devil, basically, the prince of the universe, the devil. So this is the devil's world that we're in at the moment. Although the hierarchy would have it, and it is the case, that God, Jesus, is the king. He's still the king of the world. Unfortunately, the devil is kind of left in charge as the prince of it. So, we're under his system, and he's in the details everywhere. People talk about the devil in the details. One of the things that's mentioned in the Bible is the number of the devil. The number 666, 666. It dates back to the days of Solomon, when apparently Solomon demanded. He was an Old Testament king of Israel. He demanded that he be given 666 talents of gold at the end of every year. It was like a payment or a tax. It was a tax, basically, I believe. 666 talents of gold. But he was the wealthiest man, obviously, in his kingdom, getting this tax from everybody every year. So, that forever has been associated with the devil's number, 666, It's kind of linked into one of the biblical truths, that is that the love of money is the root of all evil. The love of money, not money itself, but the love of money being the root of all evil. So the person who has the most money and loves money the most is kind of tapped into this root of all evil. It's like, they're tied into it. So it marks them, It's all about having this wealth and this power that makes a person, kind of intrinsically, essentially, an evil person, or somebody associated or linked quite closely with the devil. And so the mark of the beast. But like I said, the devil is in the details. So you'd be surprised. You shouldn't be surprised that many, if not all, successful businesses actually have the number 666 as a part of their business logo. And it shouldn't be a surprise. It should not be a surprise that is the case. It's in the Bible, and there it is in reality. Look at something like Coca-Cola. Whatever. These business logos, the ones that are successful, you always find it interwoven within their business logo, the number 666. And I've learned, that the first rule of detective work is that there's no such thing as coincidence. You say, it's a coincidence. A coincidence that the number 666 is in all these successful businesses. No, it's not a coincidence. It's a design. It's basically the devil stamping it and saying this business, boom, is his. He stamps it with his mark. So a successful business has to have it, like Apple or something like that. It's part of the Apple thing, one of the wealthiest companies. Like I said, Coca-Cola, the list goes on, it's endless, with that. But it's there in the details if you just open your eyes and see it. Hang on, why is this number 666 in all these successful business logos? Why is it there? How is it that all the people that, the marketing people that come up with the logo for these businesses keep putting the number 666 in there? How can that happen? Is it one person doing it? No, it's not. It's lots of different people in marketing and stuff, designing logos and that, graphic designers, whatever they are, marketing people. It's not designed by one person. It's designed by lots of people. But how come it has the one theme that's always there in a successful business? The 666. Why is it always there? Hello. It's a mark. It's the mark of the devil. So you just got to open your eyes and see evil is in the world. It is a reality. It's not something you can turn away from and say, no, it's not evil. There is evil. Definitely. It's the only explanation for things that happen in the world. The essence of it is, really, it's very dumb. Evil is very dumb. It's not creative at all. It's the opposite of being creative. So if you have a Christian crucifix symbol, which faces the normal way that a crucifix symbol does face, evil comes along and says, we'll turn that upside down, reverse it, we'll do the exact opposite, and that becomes a sign of evil. If there's some kind of religious event that occurred in the Bible, like the sacrifice of Abraham's son, or something like that. Practitioners of evil will want to replicate that, but do it in the opposite way. So it becomes, instead of a sacrifice to God, it becomes a sacrifice to the devil. Just taking everything in reverse it. The idea of sex changes and things like that are the same thing. God made mankind in his image. He made us male and female. That was the order set up by God. That's biblical. Look it up in Genesis. We're made to be two distinct sexes, male and female. And this idea today that you can get a person who's genetically, biologically a male, and then turn them into a genetically, well, not genetically, but biologically, with their genitals reassigned, turn them into a female, that is basically doing the exact opposite to what God did. It's evil by nature. That's what evil does. It just takes something that God did and does the exact opposite. That's what it is. Think of anything good in the world. Love, well, the opposite of that is hate. And that's evil. So, you can see it. You can see evil in the world doing the exact opposite to what is good. Does it all the time. But we're far from being hell. I mean, it's not a hell on earth. Because if you think of the good stuff that's in the world, and there's a lot of good stuff in the world, a lot of good stuff, and there are Christians out there fighting the fight against evil, against the forces and the principalities of darkness that are in the world. We're constantly battling against it, constantly holding it back, constantly trying to remind people, turn back to God, turn back to God, There's evil, there's evil, there's evil. Like that movie, one of my favourite movies, it was one of those really kind of not boutique movies, but it was done by George Harrison. Time Bandits. It's a brilliant show. And in that they have the concept of the devil being, like this evil person, and at the end he gets turned into these chunks of concentrated evil. Looked like a piece of coal at the end. It was lying there on the ground. A chunk of what was the devil kind of vaporized into black pieces of coal and that. And one chunk of it turns up, at this young boy's house with his parents there, and they reach out, oh, what's that, and he says, don't touch it, it's pure evil. And they reach out, naturally they have to touch it, pure evil, concentrated evil, but which is the exact opposite of what's good, and that's definitely in the world, that stuff, that concentrated evil that's out there. It's definitely in the world. So we've got to watch out for it. We've got to do what is good rather than what is not good, which by nature is evil. But our nature is rebellious. We want to do the evil stuff. We want to reach out and touch that concentrated evil and have a bit of a taste of that and see what that's like, which is what Adam and Eve did. Essentially rebelled against God, wanted to know more than they should have, wanted to dabble in stuff that they shouldn't have been dabbling in, and got into trouble with it, and the whole thing started from there, and it is about choice. Essentially, we're not robots. Human beings are not robots. We're not automatons. We have freedom of choice. And if you take away freedom and freedom of choices, well, you're really taking away a large part of what it is to be human. It's stripping humanity away. So what's happening at the moment, this dehumanizing, stripping away of choices, trying to turn people into robots that don't have a choice, is another stage, in the devil trying to turn people from good to evil, trying to turn us from good, which is about having choices, to evil, which is kind of no choice and going opposite to what is good, locked into doing bad stuff, like robots without a choice. So no thanks. So I think I will leave it there because I've talked enough, and God bless. Keep using your mind, keep being active, keep engaging in, conversations, read the Bible, the biblical scriptures, pray to God, love your neighbour, love God. So, which is just can be a matter of loving another person that's a member of your household, loving humanity, loving the animals, the natural world. All these things are expressions of loving God, being thankful, praising Him for what you have, and not just being negative, because the mindset of the devil is very negative. He doesn't want you to be happy with this world and stuff. He wants you to be disappointed with it, upset with God, running God down, running God's people down, running His plan down, all that sort of stuff. So do the opposite of that. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. There's another little gem from the Bible. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. There's never been a moment in my life where I have not felt that God has given me the courage to stand against evil, where there's been people that are threatening, intimidating, possibly even life-threatening and intimidating and stuff like that, and I haven't felt, that God has not given me the courage and emboldened me to stand up and say, look, this is what Jesus said when he was before Pontius Pilate. He said to Pontius Pilate, he said, you have no power over me except that. No power, no authority over me except that which is given to you from above. From above he meant from God the Father. So he was saying to Pontius Pilate, who was this guy who claimed that he had the power to crucify Jesus, to make that decision to have him executed. Jesus said, no, mate. In fact, you don't. You don't have the power to do that. You might think you do. You might think you're in control. You might think you're the king of the world, but you're not. God is still the king of the world. He's still the king of the world. And he still has to give approval for anything that happens to you or I, or to anybody in the world. So evil cannot touch us if it's not ordained by God. And God wants only what is good for us. You see? That's a reassurance. God doesn't do things that are bad for us. He does what's good for us. So if you believe in Him, trust in Him, He has in store for you what is good for Him. So He wouldn't allow it. He wouldn't allow something to happen to you that is not good for you if you trust in Him. So for your own sake, for the sake of your family, trust in God. Take a stand, make a decision, say, this is what I believe in my heart, this is what I prayed about, this is what I feel is the right thing to do, and this is what I'm going to do it. And there are people way before you, that have been mentioned in the Bible that have gone through much worse situations. There's a classic of the Bible which I'll share with you now, the story of Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego. Now, the easy way to remember this one, which is classic for me, one of the ministers that I heard a sermon on this subject about said, just remember it as shake the bed, make the bed, and to bed we go. There's your three names of your three principal characters in the story: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Shake the bed, make the bed, and to bed we go. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. So that's how you remember it. So those three characters apparently were real people, Jewish guys, but they were in a foreign country under a foreign ruler. and they were trying to do the Jewish thing, and pray and worship the Jewish God Yahweh, who effectively is God the Father in Christianity. Jesus is God the Son. The Jewish God Yahweh is God the Father. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego wanted to pray to and worship God the Father, Yahweh. But the rulers of the country they were staying in made a law, like a COVID-19 health order, saying that's basically what it was, COVID-19 health order, saying you cannot pray to any other gods except the ruler. Like this guy, whoever he was, the king or the ruler of this foreign land that they were staying in, said, "Look, I'm the king, I'm the boss here. Nobody prays to any other god but me. I'm the big boss here. I'm the god. You pray to me. You can't pray to any other gods." That's what he said. Like COVID-19 order. You've got to pray to Scott Morrison. You've got to pray to Gladys Berejiklian or whatever. Saying that you've got to pray to these leaders as being gods, or setting themselves up, in fact, as gods that you had to worship and obey. That's what they were doing. That's what he was doing. And that's what they're trying to do now. Setting themselves up as kind of fake gods or deities that we have to obey and stuff. So back then, these guys were faced with a do or die situation, because if you didn't obey, the ruler, and you broke these rules or ordinances, and you did pray to your own God and didn't pray to them, then you could be executed. And that's exactly what happened to them, because they said, no, what is better to do? Is it better to follow God, who is the king of the world, or do we follow this stupid ruler who thinks he's God, but he's not? He or she think they're some sort of deity or ruler, but they're not. They really don't have the authority to make these decisions in my life. They can't really tell me what to do on that level. They can't tell me to not have a relationship with God. They can't do that. They can't tell me to not obey God's laws. They just can't do that, because who is higher than them? God is higher than them. So who would you obey? An underling or God, who is higher? So the logical choice is God, who is higher. So that's what they decided to do. They decided to disobey the ruler of the land that had decreed this ridiculous COVID-19 style rule that said you had to worship him and not God. And they said, stuff that. We're going to worship God, the true God. And they did that. They were arrested, apprehended, taken before the ruler, and he said, we're going to chuck you guys in a furnace. That's how you're going to be executed. Incinerated, basically, in a massive furnace. Like, wow, how scary is that? They still held out. They said, nah, we're not going to comply with your ridiculous ordinance, because we're going to follow God, who's way higher than you. You're not God. You're not the ruler over us, man. You don't get to make those decisions. God does. So, okay, he said, into the furnace you go. So the three of them went in to the furnace, and when they went in there, the guys that were watching were burned up. Actually, the guards that took them in were burned up, like because of the heat coming out of the furnace. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walked in like it was nothing, and they could be seen from the outside walking around inside the furnace. And then the rulers saw another person, a fourth person inside the furnace with them, who he described as like a son of man, like a god. That person was Jesus. And Jesus arrived in the midst of that furnace, in the midst of those flames, and spoke to those three guys. And the ruler was just amazed, and he allowed them to come back out again. And they were unscathed, not a hair upon their heads. None of their flesh, their bones, nothing was singed even from having been in a furnace, walked around inside it. So the ruler had no choice but to accept that God, the true God, the God of the Jews, that Yahweh, God the Father, who is a part of the Christian Godhead, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, that he was the one true God, and that it didn't matter what you tried to do against him, or how you tried to pervert humanity against him. If somebody was true to God and put their faith in him, they were untouchable. Untouchable. So, yeah, be bold. Be strong. For the Lord your God is with you.